Alright, C14, acceptance of crude oil. Um, when practical, notice to sale should update with the strategic petroleum crude oil stream. Characters shown in Exhibit A with the strategic petroleum crude oil comprehensive analysis have the purchase shall accept the crude oil delivered with regards for the characteristics except provided with the provision of the Department of Energy, assuming the no responsible for the deviation in quantity. In the event the crude oil stream is delivered both the total sulfur with the content by weight and except for the 2% of the sour crude oil stream and 0.5% of the sweet crude oil stream in addition with the API gravity less than 28 APIs of the crude oil stream and the 22 APIs of the sweet crude oil stream, the purchaser shall accept the crude oil delivered either pay with the contract price for the accordance with the provision C16 or equivalent to negotiate with the contract price and left with the purchaser submits a written equivalent negotiable with the contract price with the contractor officer within 10 days of the day of the invoice. The purchaser will deem to have the accepted with the adjustment of the price in accordance with the provision C16. Should the purchaser request of the negotiation of the price, the parties should be unable to agree with the price of the dispute shall be settled in accordance with provision C32. C15, delivery and acceptable verification. A, the purchaser shall provide with written confirmation of strategic petroleum reserve project manager with no delay within 72 hours of the prior of the schedule of the day of the first delivery under the contract with the name of the authorized agent with the given signature authority for the sign and door for the delivery documentation of the purchase of the behalf of the exchange with the listing with the name of the must provide with the strategic petroleum with the off the reserve project management office no later than 72 hours before the delivery of the such of the chain with the applies in the event of the independent survey with the separate from the authorized signature at the agent with the appointment with the purchaser to the written to the witness, the delivery operation, the gauging, sampling, and testing, etc., with a written notification shall provide with the strategic petroleum reserve of the project manager office no later than 72 hours of the prior of the schedule of the day each of the applicable cargo delivery. B. Absence of the provision of the name of the bona fide agents of the signature of the associate agent delivery documentation constitutes acceptance of delivery quantity with the quality determined by the DOE and its other agent or its agents. 16. Price adjustment quality differential for the notice of sale with the specified the quality price of the adjustment with the applicable the crude oil with the streams offered for the sale unless otherwise specified the notice of sales quality price of the adjustment for the apply with the amount with the variation within the API gravity crude oil delivers differs but more than 1 plus or minus 5/10 for the 1 degree API and an API gravity of crude oil stream contract if it is published in the notice of sale. Price adjustment of the strategic petroleum reserve crude oil expected to be similar to one of the more commercial crude oil postings. Oil posting with equivalent quality crude oil with the contract price of the per barrel shall not exceed the less increase the amount of the API gravity of the crude delivered exceed the published API gravity more than 0.5 API of the decrease of the amount of the API gravity crude oil delivered to fail if it falls below the published API gravity by more than 0.5 APIs. C17, determination of quality. The quality of the crude oil delivered for the purchase of the determine the sample, the take of the delivery tank, the corn for the API manual, the petroleum standard with the Chapter 8.1 manual sampling with the petroleum products ASTM D4057, latest edition from the representative of the sample collected with the automatic sampler whose performance has been proven in accordance with the API manual, petroleum manual standards of the Chapter 8.2 with the automatic sampling petroleum products with the ASTM D4177. Latest edition petroleum reference will be given to the sample collected means of the automatic with the sampler with itself the system and available the operational test to be performed by the Department of Energy and its authorized contractor or are 1. Sediment and water. Primary method of the API and petroleum measurement standards. Chapter 10.1 determination of sediment into the crude oil of the fuel oils by extraction method of the latest edition API manual of the petroleum standard of the standard 10.8 with the sediment and crude oil membrane filterization. Latest edition of the API manual petroleum measuring standards. Chapter 10.2 with the determining of the water of the crude oil distillation. Latest edition or API manual of the petroleum measuring standard of the Chapter 10.9 water of the crude oil by Carl Fisher titration, latest edition, alternate methods, API manual petroleum measurement standard, Chapter 10.03, the determination water sediment crude oil by centrifuge method, laboratory procedure, ASTM D4000 IP 359, latest edition, sulfur primary method, ASTM D4294, sulfur petroleum product, the energy dispersed X-ray fluorescence fluorescence spectrometer, latest edition, alternative method, ACMD 2622, sulfur protection product protects wavelength dispersed X-ray fluorescence spectrum. 3. API gravity, primary method of the API manual measurement standard of the Chapter 9.1 density relative to the density of the specific gravity, API gravity, crude petroleum and liquid petroleum products for the hydrometer method listed at last edition or density relative to the density of the crude oil, digital density analyzer, latest edition, alternate method, API gravity code, petroleum products, latest edition. Maximum extent practicable, the primary method that you would determine the strategic petroleum crude oil quality character of the condition prevailing with the time of delivery of the necessary for the use of the alternate method to test one or more of the quality character if the government test resolve the binding in a dispute over the quality of the characteristic of the strategic petroleum reserve petroleum. The purchase of the representative may arrange the witness and verify the testing simultaneously with the U.S. government representative of the account with the purchase of any of the dispute will be settled in accordance with the provision C-32. Should the purchaser opt not to witness the testing, the government findings will be binding on the purchaser. C-18, determining quantity of the crude oil delivered for the purchase determined by the opening and closing of the tank, gave the adjustment of the opening and closing free water sediment and water with the determined the shore tank sample where an automatic sampler is not available. The delivery meter reports all volumetric measurement that will be corrected net to standard volume in a barrel. The 60 degrees Fahrenheit of the API manual with the petroleum standard manuals of the chapter 11.1, volume 1, volume correction factors, and table 5A with the generalized crude oil with the correction of the observed the API gravity with the 60 degree Fahrenheit. Table 6A with the generalized crude oil with the correction value with the 60 degree Fahrenheit against the API gravity of the 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Latest addition by deducting of the tank's free water and train sediment with the water with the determined by the testing composite all level of the sample taken with the delivery of the tanks by deducting the sediment and with the water with determined by the testing representative of the portion of the sample collected by a certified automatic sampler and also corrected by the applicable pressure correction factor and the metered factor. The quantity of the measure shall be performed by a certified the Department of Energy contractor responsible for the delivery operation witnessed by the U.S. government and representative of the delivery point of the purchase shall have right to have the representative representing of the gauge meter and the sampling of the test should purchase the remaining the additional inspection services shall be in account with their purchasers. Any dispute shall be settled in accordance with the provision C-32 should be the purchaser not arrange additional services of the Department of Energy quantity of determined shall be binding on the purchase. C-19 delivery documentation quantity and the quantity and quality determination should be documented in the strategic petroleum reserve project management off of the crude oil delivery report and see the exhibit E with a copy of this form. Strategic reserve crude oil delivery report will sign with the purchase of the agent of the knowledge recipient of the quantity of the crude oil indicated with the addition vessel's delivery time statement of the strategic petroleum reserve crude oil delivery report will be signed with the vessel master when loading is complete. The copies of the strategic petroleum reserve code the oil delivery report will be applicable supporting documentation meter of the tank of the gauging tickets. Appropriate calculation worksheets will be furnished to the purchaser and the purchaser's authorized representative after the completion of the delivery. They will serve as the base for the invoicing, the recognition invoicing of the sale of the petroleum as well as any associated services that may be provided. Contract C-20 contract amounts, contract quantities of the dollar value stated in the notice of acceptance or estimates per barrel unit of the price subject to adjustment due to the variation in API gravity from the published character of the chain of the delivery mode of the price index values if applicable. Addition due condition vessel loading and shipping over the pipeline transmission. The quantity actually delivered may vary by more than plus or minus 10% for each shipment. However, the purchaser is not required to engage additional transportation capacity. It is such capacity to take a delivery at least 90% of the contract quantity has been engaged. 21. Payment and performance letter of credit. Within 5 business days of the receipt of the notification, apparently successful offer, the purchaser must provide the contractor officer and an irrevocable standby letter of credit with the established favor in the United States of the Department of Energy, local 100% of the contract award value with the containing the substantiated provisions set out in Exhibit D, but the purchaser must furnish the acceptable letter of the credit before the Department of Energy execute the notice acceptance. The letter of the credit must not vary in substance from the sample of Exhibit D, but the letter of the credit contained with the provision with the variance of the Exhibit D and fails to include any provision contained in Exhibit D. Non-conforming provisions must be deleted. Missing the substantive provisions must be added. The letter of the credit will not be accepted. The letter of the credit must be effective before the first delivery under contract remaining in effect with a period of 120 days. Must permit the multiple partial drawings. Must contain the contractor number and the original letter of the credit must be sent to the contracting officer. The letter of credit must be issued with the depository institution located in the authorized to do business in any of the United States or districts that have Columbia authorized to issue letter of the credit with the banking laws of the United States. Any of the state of the United States of the District of Columbia, the depository institution must be an account holder of the Federal Reserve banking system and participant online with the Fedware deposit system network funds transfer system. The issue banking must provide documentation including with a person signed with the letter of the credit is authorized to do so in the form of the corporate minutes for the authorized signature list for the general resolution signature authority. A letter of credit costs will be borne by the purchaser. A letter of the credit must be maintained 100% of the contract value of the petroleum remaining when the delivered, as well as the delivered quantity of the which payment that has to be reamended with any other charges owed to the government under the contract. In the event of the letter of the credit fails below the level specified by the discretion of the contracting officer must be increased because of the effect of the pricing index of the mechanism provided with the paragraph B2 of the Department of Energy reserve the right to demand purchasers modify the letter of credit to leave with the deemed sufficient by the contracting officer. The purchaser shall make with respect to the modification within 2 business days of the being notified by the contracting officer by the express mail with the electronic means of the purchaser is deemed to have the receipt of the notification next business day after the dispatch. Such modification is not made within 2 days of the purchaser for the deemed to have the receipt of the notice of the contracting officer may have the third business day without prior notice of the purchaser with the whole of the deliveries in whole of the part of the under of the contract and or terminate the contractor in whole of the part with under provision C25. Within 30 calendar days of final payment under the contract, the contracting officer shall authorize cancellation letter of credit should return to the bank of the financial institution issuing the letter of credit, and a copy of the notice of this cancellation will be provided to the purchaser. 22. Billing and payment of the government will invoice the purchaser of the conclusion of each of the delivery payment is due within the full over the 20th of the month following each delivery of the month. The 20th of the month following on Saturday or Sunday federal holiday payment will due on the payment of the payable due the full last business day of the preceding the 20th day of the month. If an invoice is not paid on in full, the government may provide with the purchaser or with a written notification of purchase with the delinquent in the payment withdrawal against the letter of the credit of all quantity of which were unpaid with the invoice outstanding withhold any of the parts of any future deliveries under the contract and terminate with the contract in whole part in accordance with the provision C25. In the event the bank refuses to honor the draft against the letter of the credit, the purchaser shall be responsible for paying the principal and any interest due. Provision C24 from the due date. Alright, methods of payment. All amounts payable for the purchaser shall be paid either the deposit account with the U.S. Treasury, with the wire transfer funds, over the Federal Wire Deposit System Network, with the information to be included with each of the wire transfers to be provided with a notice of sale. Electronic funds transfer with the Automated Clearinghouse Network with the Federal Remittance Express Program. The information should be included with each of the transfer provided with a notice of sale. All wire deposits, electronic funds for transfer of the cost will be borne by the purchaser. If the purchaser disagrees with the amount of the invoice for the government, the purchaser shall immediately pay with the amount invoice of notifying the contracting officer on the basis of its disagreement with the contracting officer will receive the act upon with any such of the objection with the failure to agree with any of the adjustments shall be provided to dispute with any of the purchaser shall file with the claimant promptly in accordance with provision C32. Department of Energy may designate any other place of the determining different time and another method of payment after reasonable written notice to the purchaser. Notwithstanding any other contract provision, the Department of Energy may veto the draft message of the request of wire transfer funds against the standby letter of the credit any of the time of the payment of the monies due under the contract remaining unpaid in violation of the terms of the contract. These would include, but not limited to, the interest of the delinquent, the damage of the damage amounts of the owning of any of the further provided with under the contract. The difference between the contract price and the price received on the resale of the undelivered petroleum is defined in provision C25. If the invoice is delinquent payments, its interest shall accrue from the payment due date. No payment due to the Department of Energy hereunder shall be subject to the reduction or set off of any claim in any kind of against the United States arising independently of the contract. C4. Interest. Amounts due to be payable by the purchaser of the bank are not paid in accordance with the provision governing such payments if they shall bear interest with the date with the due until the date payment is received by the government. Interest shall be computed with a daily basis. The interest rate shall be in accordance with the current value of the funds rate established by the Department of Treasury according with the Debt Collection Improvement Act of 1997, published periodically in bulletins to the Treasury Official Requirements Manual and Federal Registry. C25. Termination. Immediate termination. Contractor officer may terminate the contractor in whole with a part without liability with the Department of Energy. Written notice of the purchaser with the effect of the upon with the being deposited with the U.S. Postal System and the draft of the purchaser provided in provision C31. The event of the purchaser either notified the contracting officer that will not be acceptable. Able to accept or fail to accept any delivery item in accordance with the terms of the contract. Such notice shall invite purchasers to submit information from the contracting officer as to the reason why the failure to accept the delivery line item in accordance with the terms of the contract. 2. Within 10 business days after the issuance of the notice of the termination, the contractor often may determine if the termination was a termination for a default under paragraph B1(2) of the provision. In the absence of the term information, will persuade the contracting officer of the purchaser failed to accept the delivery of the line item will be excusable. The fact of such failure may be basis of the contracting officer determining the purchase to be in default without first determining under paragraphs B2 and B3 whether such failure was excusable under the terms of the contract. The contracting officer shall promptly give the purchaser with a written notice of the termination. Any immediate termination offer determined to be termination default in accordance with the paragraph A2 with the and B with the provision shall be determination with the conveniency of the Department of Energy without liability of the government. B. Termination by default, subject to the provision, paragraph the B2 and the B3. Contracting officer may terminate with the contract in whole and the part with the purchase of the default without liability of the Department of Energy with a written notice of this purchase with the effect of the file with the meaning deposit with the U.S. Department of Postal System and driven the purchaser of the provided with the paragraph provision C31. In the event that 1. The government does not receive the payment in accordance with any of the payment provision of the contract. 2. The purchaser fails to accept the delivery and the Petroleum in accordance with the terms of the contract. 3. The purchaser fails to comply with any of the terms and condition of the contract within 5 business days after the purchase of the team to have receive the written notice of such failure from contracting officer. 2. With respect to the default with the subcontractor, the purchaser shall not determine the default will be charged with any liability. Department of Energy under circumstances that prevent the purchaser acceptance of the delivery here under the review of the cause beyond the control of the without fault negligence of the purchaser determined above the contracting officer. Such causes shall include but are not limited to the acts of the God of the public enemy. Acts of government acting in sovereign or contractual capacity, fires, floods, earthquakes, explosions, unusual, severe weather, other catastrophes, and strikes. We're going to cut the tape there just to save.